Have you ever found someone lie on the side of the road in a wedding dress, soaked in rain, with no memory of who they are? What would you do? Would you drive on, pretending you didn't see her? Or stop, knowing your life might never be the same again? That night, under a sky split by lightning and silence, Gavin Monroe made a choice, one that would unravel a secret bigger than both of them. And it all began with a broken ankle, a gold bracelet, and a name she didn't remember. In the next 30 minutes, you're going to hear a true story about how a small-town mechanic saved a stranger, and how that stranger turned out to be a missing millionaire bride, running from a life she never chose. We'll follow their journey from fear to freedom, from secrecy to healing, and discover what it really means to choose your own path, even when the world says you can't. But before we go deeper, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like you were living a life written by someone else? If so, this story is for you, because sometimes the detours we never planned lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Let's begin. The rain had a strange way of quieting everything. In the little mountain town of Braxton Ridge, storms weren't unusual, but that night, it was different. It was the kind of rain that made even the pine trees whisper. And for Gavin Monroe, it came at the end of a long oil-stained shift at the only auto shop in town. Gavin was the kind of man who blended into the background. Quiet, steady, dependable. He didn't look for trouble, didn't chase excitement. Most days, he went home to a warm supper, a creaky porch swing, and silence. But not that night. As he drove his old pickup down the winding road, headlights slicing through fog like a blade, something caught his eye. White, crumpled, unmoving, right at the edge of the woods. At first, he thought it was a tarp or some trash blown off a truck bed, but something about the way it lay there, uneven, fragile, made his stomach twist. He slammed on the brakes. What he found wasn't trash. It was a woman, drenched unconscious, barefoot, and wearing a torn wedding dress. Her face streaked with rain, mud, and something darker, blood. He dropped to his knees beside her without thinking. "Can you hear me? You're going to be okay. I'm not letting you die out here." His voice shook, but his hands didn't. Years ago, he'd volunteered for the mountain rescue team. He never thought he'd need those skills again. But life has a way of making the forgotten useful. With careful hands, Gavin cleaned the cut on her forehead, wrapped it, and bundled her in his jacket. She didn't wake up, but she breathed, and that was enough. He lifted her into his truck, one arm supporting her head, the other her twisted ankle. She was light, too light, like someone who hadn't eaten right in days, or someone who'd been running from something or someone. And here's where the real story begins. Because Gavin could have just called 911. He could have dropped her at the hospital and walked away, but he didn't. He stayed. All night, he waited by her side, asked questions no one could answer, and stared at a gold bracelet on her wrist, engraved with a symbol he didn't recognize. He didn't know it then, but he had just stepped into the center of a story that would change not only her life, but his. Brain a little lesson here? Sometimes, doing the right thing won't feel big. It won't make headlines. It'll feel like a quiet choice on a rainy night. That echoes for the rest of your life. Because the smallest moment, one stranger, one storm, can unravel everything you thought you knew about yourself. And that brings us to the morning after. The woman in the wedding dress would soon open her eyes, but what she'd say and what she wouldn't remember would only deepen the mystery. Let's talk about that next. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and tired hope. It was a small place, 4 floors humming fluorescent lights, and nurses who knew most of their patients by name. But this woman, the one Gavin had carried in from the storm, was a stranger in every sense of the word. No ID, no phone, no purse, not even a name. She lay in a hospital bed, pale against white sheets, a thin line of dry blood still clinging to her hairline. The doctor said she had a mild concussion, a dislocated ankle, and severe exhaustion. They also said she was lucky, very lucky, but luck was relative. When Gavin leaned closer to adjust the blanket around her, something caught his eye, a bracelet, simple, Gold, elegant, but heavy and expensive looking. It shimmered as it caught the light from the hallway, revealing a symbol carved delicately on the inside. A serpent coiled around a blooming flower. Not a brand logo. Not something you'd pick up in a tourist shop. It felt ancient, intentional, like it had history, like it belonged to someone important. That was the first clue. Later, when the woman stirred just briefly, she didn't speak in full sentences. She whispered broken phrases. Car chase, wedding cliff. Then she slipped back into unconsciousness. It didn't make sense, but it didn't have to. Not yet. The nurse looked at Gavin kindly, maybe a little curiously. "You're not family, are you?" He shook his head. "No, I just found her." The nurse sighed. "Well, she doesn't have anyone listed. No next of kin. No emergency contact." And the social workers backed up. "You seem steady. Would you mind staying for a bit? Just until she stabilizes?" And Gavin said yes. Not because he had answers, but because something in her silence felt familiar. Because maybe he, too, knew what it meant to be a ghost in your own story. Brain hears the quiet truth. Sometimes the people who look the most put together on the outside, bracelets, gowns, clean lines, are the ones fighting the biggest battles inside. And sometimes, when life hands you a mystery, you don't need to solve it right away. You just need to sit with it. Listen. Stay. That night, Gavin didn't go home. He sat by her bedside, flipping through an old magazine he didn't read, keeping watch over someone he still didn't know. And when the storm outside finally cleared, he still hadn't left. The next time she opened her eyes, really opened them, she would speak, but not with answers, with a question that would change everything. The first thing she said was a whisper, so soft Gavin almost missed it. "Where am I?" He leaned forward, careful not to startle her. "You're safe," he said gently. "You're in Braxton Ridge Hospital. I found you by the road. Do you remember anything?" Her eyes, gray and clear like winter rain, searched the room. She looked down at her hospital gown, then slowly at her arms. The dress was gone. The mud, the blood, the storm, gone too, but not the fear. Her hands clutched the blanket, like it might float her away. I don't know who I am." She said it like an apology, like forgetting herself was somehow her fault. Gavin shook his head, voice steady. "That's okay. Really, we'll figure it out. But for now, how about we give you a name?" He smiled, eyes drifting to the small tattoo peeking out from under her gold bracelet. "A single lily, simple and elegant. It suits you, Lily." She looked down at it for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, Lily." Over the next 2 days, it became clear her injuries weren't just physical. Loud sounds made her flinch. Flashlights or hallway monitors made her wince and shield her eyes. She barely slept, and when she did, she often woke in a cold sweat, gasping. The nurses said she might be dealing with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, a response to something big, violent, sudden, but without a medical record or family. There was no way to know what she'd been through. Still, the signs were there. A trembling hand when a stranger knocked. A moment of stillness that turned into panic when someone wheeled in a food tray too quickly. Even Gavin, careful as he was, noticed how often she stared out the window, not in wonder, in fear, like something or someone might appear at any moment. But she didn't ask to leave. She didn't ask him to go. That meant something. So Gavin stayed. He brought crossword puzzles. He brought coffee. He even brought an old leather notebook, gently encouraging her to write anything. A dream, a color, a sound that felt familiar. And little by little, something shifted. Brain, there's something we forget sometimes. Healing doesn't always look like medicine and miracles. Sometimes it's slow, messy, like patching a roof in the rain. You just do the best you can with what you have. And sometimes all a person needs to begin again is a safe space and someone who doesn't rush to silence. Gavin didn't ask for her secrets. He didn't press for a timeline. He just showed up. And one night, that made all the difference. Because around midnight, the silence cracked wide open, and Lily screamed. Not a whimper, not a startled cry. A scream, raw, full of fear and memory. Gavin ran to her room, heart pounding. She was thrashing in the sheets, hands clawing the air. No. Stop. I won't marry him. Let me go. You promise. He dropped to her side, grabbing her shoulders. It's a dream. You're safe. Lily, wake up. Her eyes snapped open. Tears streamed down her cheeks. He said I had to marry him because my family owed them. I didn't want to. I ran, and he caught me, dragged me to the car. She trembled. Gavin didn't speak. He just held her hand. You remember, he said softly. She nodded slowly, eyes wide, voice barely above breath. I remember his face, cold, like he didn't care if I lived or died. That was the night Lily's memories began to return. Not all at once, but in fragments, shaky, incomplete, terrifying. And Gavin knew then, this wasn't just a lost girl in a storm. She was running from something, from someone, and they might not be done chasing her yet. When the hospital could no longer keep her, and no one came forward to claim her, there was only one place left to go. Gavin's place. A small cabin tucked just outside Braxton Ridge, where the air smelled like pine and silence wasn't scary. It was soft. The cabin wasn't much. One bedroom, a guest room that still smelled like cedar, and a kitchen with squeaky drawers and chipped mugs. But to Lily, it was everything she didn't know she needed. At first, she moved like a guest. Quiet, cautious, polite. She thanked Gavin for every meal, washed her own dishes, and folded the blankets twice. She barely spoke unless spoken to, and when she did, her voice was gentle, like someone used to being told not to take up too much space. Some days, she just sat on the porch for hours, watching the trees shift in the wind, like she was listening for footsteps in the distance. But Gavin never pushed. Instead, he built little bridges with small things. He taught her how to make biscuits, his mother's old recipe. He handed her a wrench and showed her how to check the oil in the truck. He left a book on the nightstand, one with underlined quotes and a pressed flower between the pages. And bit by bit, Lily stopped saying thank you after every little kindness. She just smiled. One morning, as Gavin stirred eggs on the stove, she looked up from her tea. I saw something, she said quietly. Last night, in my sleep. He set the spatula down. What did you see? A ballroom. Big. Cold. I wasn't dancing. I was locked in it. She frowned, as if pulling the pieces into focus. There was a woman, older, elegant, but cold. She kept saying I was being foolish, that I had to go through with it. Gavin stepped closer, listening. Do you know who she was? Lily hesitated. I think she's my mother. That was the first real memory. A name not spoken, but felt. Later that day, Gavin gave her the old leather notebook again. She wrote for hours, just phrases at first. Silver comb, satin gloves, locked doors, cold hands. She didn't cry. She didn't explain. She just wrote, like someone unlocking a door from the inside. Brain. And here's the thing about memory. It doesn't always come back like a movie, scene by scene. Sometimes it returns like music, one note at a time. And sometimes the song it plays isn't one you want to hear. But Lily was listening. She wasn't running anymore. She was remembering. And that meant she was healing. Seedling a small truth worth keeping. Home isn't always the place you're born in. Sometimes it's a quiet cabin. Sometimes it's the person who listens without interrupting. And sometimes it's the silence that finally lets you hear your own voice again. But peace never lasts forever. And Lily's past wasn't done knocking. Because one quiet Saturday at the flea market, a sticker on an old truck would unlock a memory she had buried so deep it nearly broke her. Braxton Ridge wasn't known for excitement, but twice a month, its sleepy town square turned into a treasure hunt. Locals would gather for the flea market, where old farm tools, faded quilts, and lemon pies shared space on sun-worn tables. That Saturday morning, Gavin thought it might be a good idea. A change of scenery. A breath of normal. Lily hesitated. her scarf wrapped gently around her head, sunglasses perched low. Even though the sky was overcast, she moved like someone still learning how to exist in the open. They walked slowly, past jars of pickles, antique bird cages, and stacks of dusty books. For a moment, she smiled, really smiled, at a little girl chasing bubbles in the grass. It was the kind of smile that makes you believe someone's healing. But then, she stopped, frozen, still, her eyes locked on something behind a booth at the far end of the lot. An old rusted pickup truck, hood popped open for display. On its door, a faded black sticker. A serpent coiled around a single white flower. Her knees buckled. Gavin was by her side in seconds, catching her before she hit the ground. "Lily, what is it?" "Talk to me." But she was somewhere else now. Her body trembled, her breath caught, and her voice, barely above a whisper, shook the stillness. That was on the dashboard. The car, the one he locked me in. The floodgates burst open. I screamed. I begged. I kicked the windows. He didn't flinch. He just kept driving. He said, "You belong to him now. There's no going back." She clung to Gavin like a lifeline, tears streaking her cheeks, as pieces of the puzzle snapped into place. "I jumped," she said. "I opened the door while the car was still moving. There was gravel, trees, then everything went black." It all made sense now. The torn wedding dress, the bruises, the twisted ankle. She hadn't gotten lost. She had escaped. Later, back at the cabin, Gavin lit the fire while Lily sat wrapped in a blanket, the notebook open in her lap. She wrote for hours that night, not in fragments this time, but in full, breathless sentences, about the forced engagement, about her mother's silence, about a man named Henry, and the cold deal her family had made with him. She didn't need him to say anything. She just needed to let it out. And Gavin, as always, just listened. "Brain, you know, sometimes healing doesn't come from answers. It comes from release. From letting yourself say the thing out loud, the thing you were told to keep buried. Because naming the truth is often the first step to reclaiming your story." And in that moment, shaking, exhausted, but no longer silent, Lily was no longer just surviving. She was remembering. And remembering made her dangerous to the people who thought they still owned her future. The next morning, the air was different, thicker, heavier, and Gavin noticed a man standing outside the gas station across from the hardware store. Too still, too clean, too curious. At first, Gavin thought he was just being paranoid. A man standing too long outside the post office. A black SUV parked for hours with engine off and windows tinted. A customer at the diner who never touched his coffee. Small things. But small things add up, especially when you've been taught to listen to your gut. And Gavin's gut was now screaming. He didn't tell Lily right away. He didn't want to scare her unless he was sure. But then came the moment. They were at the hardware store, looking at paint colors for the porch. Lily was holding 2 swatches, bluebell and cornflower, and laughing at how she couldn't tell the difference. That's when her smile vanished. She froze, staring out the front window. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "That's him." Gavin turned. The man was outside. Same face from her memory. Same presence. Not just watching. Waiting. "He's one of Henry's men," she said. "A bodyguard. He was in the car. He dragged me away." Gavin's jaw tightened. He nodded once. "Stay here." He stepped outside, casual on the surface, but alert in every step. The man turned and walked off, but not fast enough. Gavin followed. Weaving between booths, watched him get into the SUV and pull out a phone. Then he heard it. Positive ID. "Yes, she's here. Looks like she's with someone local." Gavin backed away slowly. The past had found them. They didn't wait for nightfall. By the time they got home, Gavin was already gathering essentials. Cash from an old tin box, 2 flashlights, tools, an emergency first aid kit. Lily packed a notebook, the flannel shirt Gavin had given her, and the gold bracelet she once tried to forget. They loaded everything into the truck in silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from fear, but the kind that comes when 2 people already know what the other is thinking. Just as they shut the tailgate, Headlights appeared in the distance. Too slow, too deliberate. Gavin didn't need confirmation. He grabbed Lily's hand. Go now. They disappeared into the woods, branches brushing their arms. Rain beginning to fall again like an old memory. The forest swallowed their footsteps. But escape isn't clean. It never is. After an hour of running, Lily stumbled. Her ankle, still healing, twisted again. She cried out and collapsed into the mud. Gavin was beside her in a flash. Are you hurt? She nodded, teeth clenched, shaking with pain and guilt. I'm slowing you down. He looked her in the eyes. No, you're why I'm still moving. And then, without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms. It was familiar, like the first night all over again, but different now, because this time she wasn't unconscious. She was choosing to hold on. They found shelter under a rocky outcrop just before the sky split open in thunder. Rain lashed down, and behind them, voices. Amelia! Low, calm, controlled. We don't want to hurt you. Come back now. This ends peacefully. Lily buried her face in Gavin's chest. They're here. He leaned in, forehead against hers. Let them think they're close. We'll double back at first light. And so they waited, in the dark, in the storm, hearts pounding, but hands held tight. Brain a quiet lesson in the chaos. Sometimes love means running, not away from something, but towards something worth protecting. And sometimes the bravest thing two people can do is stay still in the storm and believe they'll outlast it. The rain passed by morning. The forest shimmered, fresh and soaked, like it had witnessed a secret. But Gavin wasn't done yet, because Lily, Amelia, was ready for more than hiding. She was ready to decide who she was, and what came next. The cabin was old, logs weathered by time, windows fogged by the cold, and a faint scent of cedar clinging to everything like memory. It belonged to one of Gavin's old hunting buddies, a place forgotten on purpose, tucked deep in the hills where cell signals didn't dare reach. It wasn't luxury, but it was safe, and for now that was enough. They spent the first day in silence. Lily, Amelia, barely moved from the pile of blankets where Gavin had gently propped up her injured ankle. He cooked soup. She stared at the fire. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was weighty, necessary, like the kind of silence that comes before something breaks, or begins. On the second day, she spoke. I can't run forever, she said, eyes locked on the fog outside the window. Gavin looked up, cautious. You don't have to, he said. We'll keep going. We'll figure it out. She turned to face him. But I don't want to figure out by hiding. I want to face them. My mother, Henry, all of it. There was no panic in her voice this time. No trembling, just clarity. Gavin walked over, sat across from her. You don't owe them anything. I know, she nodded, but I owe myself something. I need to stand in front of them and prove I'm not theirs to control. Not a pawn, not an asset. Just me. For the first time since the night, he found her on the roadside. Gavin saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Resolve. This wasn't fear driving her anymore. It was choice, and that mattered more than anything. He reached out, gently brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Then I'm going with you. You're not doing this alone. She didn't argue. She didn't hesitate. She just smiled, small, quiet, but full of something stronger than fear. Hope, brain, and here's something real. You can't always choose a story you're born into, but you can choose when to rewrite it. You can choose when silence ends, when fear stops leading, and when your voice, shaky, tired, but yours, says no more. Amelia had spent her whole life obeying, surviving, escaping. But now, she was choosing. And sometimes, the most powerful moment in a person's life isn't when they scream or fight or run. It's when they finally stop hiding. 3 days later, they arrived in the city, not as victims, but as people who had made a decision. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, just clean lines, quiet strength, and a name she was ready to reclaim. The Richmond estate stood tall and cold like it always had. But this time, the girl standing at its door was no longer afraid. The Richmond estate hadn't changed. Marble steps, iron gates, silence that smelled like money. It was the kind of place built to keep people out and to keep certain people in. But this time, Amelia didn't knock like a daughter. She arrived like a truth that wouldn't wait anymore. Gavin stood beside her, calm, steady, his hand brushing hers once before she let go and walked in. The butler blinked when he opened the door. "Miss Richmond, we thought you were. Tell my mother and Henry I'm here." Her voice was clear. No shaking, no question mark. Minutes later, she stood in the drawing room, the same one where her engagement had been announced a year earlier, the same one where she'd first been told, "This isn't about love, it's about survival." Eleanor Richmond sat stiff-backed on the velvet settee, hands folded, lips pursed like she'd been waiting for a war to begin. Henry Vale stood near the fireplace, calm, cold, calculating, still wearing the smile of a man who believed nothing could touch him. "You've caused quite the mess," Eleanor said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Do you have any idea what you've cost us?" Amelia didn't flinch. "I know exactly what it cost, and I'm done paying for your mistakes." Henry chuckled. "So, this is a grand rebellion? You vanish, reappear with some country boy, and think the world will applaud?" "I don't expect applause," she said, stepping forward. "I came to say this face to face. I will not marry you. I never will. And if my inheritance, my name, my place in this family depends on that, I give it all up." Her mother stood now, not with grace, but with fury. "Don't be foolish, Amelia. You're walking away from everything." "No," Amelia said, voice calm and steady. "I'm walking toward something, toward a life that is mine, without chains, without shame." Henry moved closer. "You think that mechanic can protect you? You'll be nothing without this family." She looked him dead in the eye. "Then I'll be nothing and free and loved, which is more than I ever got from either of you."
There was a silence that followed. Not loud, not theatrical, just still, like something had finally ended. And in that stillness, Amelia turned. She didn't run. She didn't look back. She walked, back into the daylight, back to Gavin, who waited by the car like he always had, steady, unshaken, and proud. "Well," he asked. She exhaled. "It's over. I left it all behind." He smiled. "Good. Now we can start something new. Bring a truth worth remembering. Sometimes freedom costs everything. Money, titles, approval. But the price of staying quiet, staying small, staying obedient, that cost is so much higher. And the moment you stand in your truth, especially when it shakes the foundation of everything around you, is the moment you stop surviving and start living." A year later, Amelia wasn't in the headlines. She wasn't at galas or charity events. She was behind the counter at Lily and Oak, a small-town cafe that smelled like fresh scones and cinnamon. And across the street, Gavin's garage hummed with life. Because sometimes leaving everything behind is the first step to building a life that actually feels like yours. In the heart of Braxton Ridge, right on the corner of Main Street, sat a little cafe with ivy curling around the windows and a hand-painted sign above the door. Lily and Oak. It didn't look like much from the outside, just wooden glass and a few flower pots that always leaned a little to the left. But inside was warmth, not just from the ovens or the smell of cinnamon rolls, but from something deeper, from someone finally home. Amelia, now just Lily to most people in town, ran the place with flour on her sleeves and fire in her eyes. She remembered people's coffee orders before they spoke. She knew which farmer sold the best honey and which elderly couple needed extra napkins with their lemon pie. She didn't talk about her past, and no one asked, because in Braxton Ridge, people didn't need your resume. They needed your presence. And Lily showed up every day, fully, quietly, honestly. Across the street, Gavin opened his dream shop, Monroe Auto and Repair. He fixed engines, trained local teens, and taught Lily how to rotate her tires and change her own oil, just because. Some days, he'd walk into the cafe with grease still on his hands, just to see her smile. And every time she did, he looked like he'd found something money could never buy. There were still hard days. Lily had nightmares, woke up breathless, sometimes sat by the window for hours when certain cars passed by too slowly. But she didn't break, because now she wasn't alone, and she wasn't surviving. She was living, planting roots, making muffins, restoring more than just herself. Brain, you see, rebuilding doesn't always look like blueprints and budgets. Sometimes it's baking scones with a name you chose for yourself. It's fixing a porch swing that creaks but still holds. It's creating a life that fits like soft denim, broken in but yours. And here's the truth. You don't need to start big to build something beautiful. You just need to start, even if all you have are bare hands and a borrowed name. One morning, as the town stretched awake under golden autumn light, Lily stood in the clearing behind the cafe. A few folding chairs, a wooden arch wrapped in white ribbon, and the same wedding dress she once ran from, now cleaned, mended, and worn with peace. Because this time, she wasn't running away from anything. She was walking towards someone. The sun rose soft that morning, casting light across the wildflowers behind the cafe, turning the dew into diamonds on the grass. There were no reporters, no designer florals, no orchestra, just folding chairs, mason jars, neighbors, and two people who had once been strangers, now standing under a wooden arch wrapped in ribbon, surrounded by a community that had become family. Lily wore the same wedding dress, the one she'd escaped in, the one that once felt like a cage. But now, it shimmered not with fear, but with freedom. Her hair was pinned loosely with daisies. Her feet were bare. Her eyes were clear. And across from her, Gavin stood in a simple suit, holding the same calm he had carried since the night he first found her by the road. The pastor spoke softly. The town sat in silence, some wiping tears, some holding hands, all of them understanding that this right here was sacred, not because it was perfect, but because it was chosen. When it came time for vows, Gavin went first. "When I found you, you were lost," he said. "But I think I was too. And somewhere in the middle of everything, you became my compass." Lily's voice trembled, but she smiled. "You saw me when I didn't even know who I was. Not just the pieces, but the whole of me. And with you, I've become someone I actually like being. This life, I choose it. With you. Again and again." There were no grand speeches, no fireworks, but when they kissed, the wind rustled through the trees, and fireflies rose like lanterns all around them. They danced barefoot on the grass, her head on his chest, his arms around her waist, and the rest of the world, finally, quiet. Brain, and maybe that's the truest kind of love. Not the kind you chase through storms or lose in castles, but the kind that finds you in your quietest moment and stays. Because real love doesn't rescue you. It recognizes you. It reflects back everything you forgot you were. Strong, soft, worthy, whole. And the most beautiful life is when you choose twice. Once for survival, and once for joy. Later that night, Gavin asked her gently, "Do you ever miss it?" She looked up at him, smiled softly, and kissed his jaw, not even a little. They say wealth is measured in numbers. Bank accounts, titles, legacy. But Braxton Ridge would tell you something different. Because here, wealth looked like a handwritten menu on a chalkboard. It sounded like Gavin humming off-key in the garage. It tasted like Lily's lemon scones, warm from the oven. And it felt like the steady beat of two hearts that had finally found peace. Amelia Richmond was no longer a name whispered in headlines. She wasn't a missing bride, or a runaway heiress, or the answer to a family's failed investments. She was just Lily, the woman who remembered your order without asking, the woman who knew what freedom cost, and still said, "I'd pay it again." She and Gavin built their life with bare hands. No blueprint, no inheritance, just patience, kindness, and a whole lot of grace for the days that still hurt. They celebrated small wins, like the first time she slept through the night, the first time she laughed without flinching, the first time she danced again. And the town? It wrapped around them like old quilt patches imperfect, colorful, comforting. Brain, so here's the quiet lesson this story leaves behind. The life you're meant to live might not be the one others plan for you. It might not come with guarantees or applause or power, but it will come with peace, with laughter in the kitchen, with grease on your hands and flour on your cheeks, with love that doesn't ask you to shrink or sacrifice, only to stay. And sometimes it's not the straight road that leads us home. It's the detour, the wrong turn, the night you stopped to help a stranger in the rain and found yourself in the process. Lily never reclaimed the old world because what she gained was better, not bigger, just real. And that's the kind of wealth that lasts forever. Clapperboard if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the quiet strength it takes to walk away, or the everyday beauty of starting over. Then like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Michael Stories, where every tale is a journey back to the heart. Tell us in the comments, what's one detour that unexpectedly led you home? Herb,